The desert plain lay quiet after the last war. Dust moved in thin lines across the cracked ground, carrying the scent of burned metal and old blood. Evan stood with his helmet under one arm, feeling the weight of silence heavier than any armor. He had fought for 3 long years, watched cities fall and skies burn. Yet this stillness unsettled him more than any battle. Peace had come, yes, but it was fragile, like a glass bridge stretched over a bottomless canyon. A message had arrived that morning from the new Allied command. The Korra, the towering giant people of the next star, had offered a formal truce. They wanted a bonding exchange, one human to meet one of their own in a ceremony that would link minds and hearts. It wasn't a marriage. It wasn't even a treaty. It was older than words, a living connection of spirit. Command said the bond might stop another war before it began. They also said it might fail and kill whoever tried. When the call for volunteers came, the briefing room stayed silent. Soldiers shifted in their chairs. A few cleared their throats. No one raised a hand. Everyone had lost someone in the war. Everyone carried scars. The Korra had fought fiercely, their strength almost mythic. They were huge, 4 times a human's height, and their deep voices carried like thunder. Stories said they could crush a tank with bare hands. And now command asked for trust? Evan felt his chest tighten. He remembered the faces of the dead. Marcus, who used to hum old jazz before firefights. Little Lena from the medic unit, who had never learned to hide her smile. He thought of nights when the sky burned red and of mornings when silence meant only that both sides were counting their losses. If a single human step could keep another generation from that pain, he knew he had to take it. "I'll go," he said, his voice steady though his stomach turned. Head snapped toward him. Captain Morales narrowed her eyes. "You understand the risk, Sergeant?" "I do," Evan replied. He felt every gaze like a weight, but he did not look away. A slow breath passed through the room. The captain gave a single nod. "Then you represent Earth." That evening, Evan rode a transport across the barren plain. The vehicle rattled over broken stone, its engine a lonely heartbeat. As the sun dropped, the horizon began to glow, not with fire but with a soft blue shimmer. The Korra settlement appeared like a dream, immense towers of crystal and stone rising like frozen lightning into the violet sky. Lights pulsed along their surfaces, alive and slow as if the city itself breathed. At the gate, he stepped down and felt suddenly small. 2 Korra guards approached, each towering nearly 20 feet high. Their skin shone faintly like moonlit bronze. Their golden eyes studied him, calm but unreadable. One lowered her head slightly, a gesture of respect, he guessed, and motioned for him to follow. They led him through wide streets where the ground seemed to hum beneath his boots. Children peeked from doorways, their laughter low and musical. He felt their curiosity like a gentle breeze. No one here looked like an enemy. They looked ancient, alive, different beyond measure, yet not cruel. At last they reached an open courtyard lit by a circle of crystal torches. In the center was a pool of water so still it mirrored the stars. Across the pool a figure waited. She was taller than the guards, her silhouette glowing against the twilight. When she stepped forward, Evan's breath caught. She was a giant, yes, but her face was young, her features fine as carved glass. Her eyes were molten gold, bright yet soft. Braids of dark hair fell over her shoulders like ropes of midnight. She moved with a slow grace, every step a silent thunder. The guards bowed and left, leaving Evan alone. The giant girl knelt so that her face lowered to his level. The air trembled with her voice, a sound like distant drums. "You are the human?" she asked, each word careful. "Yes," Evan said, forcing his voice not to shake. "My name is Evan." She studied him, golden eyes searching. "I am Leora." Her name rippled through the air like music. She tilted her head. "You are not afraid?" Evan swallowed hard. He was afraid of her size, of the unknown bond of failing. But he also felt something else, a quiet pull deeper than fear. He met her gaze and answered, "I'm here, aren't I?" For a long moment they simply looked at each other, 2 worlds measuring the space between them. The stars reflected in the pool, scattered like tiny fires. A gentle wind carried the scent of some alien flower, sweet and strange. Leora extended a hand, palm up, massive enough to cradle him whole. "Then we begin," she said softly. Evan stepped closer, the ground humming under his boots. He placed his small hand on the warm surface of her palm. A faint shimmer of light flickered between their skins. It felt like standing at the edge of a vast ocean, the tide of another mind brushing against his own. His heartbeat slowed. The silence deepened. In that single touch, the distance of galaxies seemed to shrink, and so the first step of the bond began, not with words or weapons, but with a quiet act of courage under the violet sky. The next morning, a pale gold light washed over the crystal towers of the Korra city. Evan woke in the guest quarters the Giants had prepared for him. The room was large enough to fit a small house, yet every detail showed careful thought. A bed of soft woven vines that adjusted to his size, a basin of clear water that glowed faintly in the dark, and a window that opened to a view of two pale moons sinking into a lavender sky. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his eyes. His heart still carried the echo of last night, the moment he placed his hand on Leora's palm and felt that strange, gentle shimmer between them. It had not been a shock or a jolt. It was more like a tide touching sand. Quiet, patient, endless. He wondered if she had felt it too. A soft chime sounded near the door. A voice, deep and melodic, spoke through a translator panel. Evan of Earth, the Council invites you to the Dawn Court. The bond rite begins soon. He dressed quickly and stepped outside. Cool air carried a scent like rain on stone. Giant Korra walked the streets, their slow footsteps causing a faint vibration in the ground. Some glanced at him with curiosity, others with something like caution. Children peered from behind glowing pillars, their laughter like distant bells. Two Korra guides led him through broad avenues. The walls of their city shone like frozen lightning, pulsing with slow blue light. Evan felt as though he was walking inside a living star. When they reached the courtyard from the night before, he saw Leora waiting near the same still pool, her form bright in the soft morning light. She rose when she saw him. "You came," she said. Her voice carried across the water, gentle but strong. "I said I would," Evan answered, a small smile on his lips despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. Leora stepped closer, each stride silent yet powerful. "Today we share the first telling," she said. "I speak of my people. You speak of yours, we listen. We remember." A circle of Korra elders stood at the edges of the courtyard. Their golden eyes watched with careful calm like judges of some ancient trial. Evan felt their gaze but kept his focus on Leora. They sat on opposite sides of the crystal pool. The water reflected the two moons and the pale rising sun. Leora placed her hand near the surface and the water began to glow with soft silver light. "This is the memory pool," she explained. "It carries echoes of thought. We speak and the water remembers." Evan nodded, trying to hide his awe. Leora began. Her deep voice rolled like a low drum, telling of her people's long journeys between stars. She spoke of towering mountains on her homeworld, of storms that sang across endless plains, of the pride that bound the Korra together through centuries of wandering. Her words painted pictures in Evan's mind: great sky bridges of light, seas of molten silver, cities grown like crystal forests. Yet beneath her pride, he sensed a quiet loneliness. Her people had crossed galaxies, but few other species welcomed them. Fear of their size and strength kept them apart. "We are many," she said, "but often we are alone." When it was his turn, Evan drew a deep breath. "Earth is small," he began. "Blue oceans, green forests, cities that never sleep." He spoke of music under warm night skies, of children chasing fireflies, of storms that smelled of salt and soil. He told of laughter around campfires, of winter snow that muffled the world, of the stubborn hope humans carried even in war. As he spoke, images flickered on the water's surface, tiny glowing echoes of his memories. He saw the faint outline of his mother's garden, the warm light of a street at dusk, the battered but bright flags after a long battle. The elders murmured softly, surprised by the vividness. Leora listened with her golden eyes fixed on him, as if each word was a thread she carefully wove into her heart. "Your world sounds alive," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "It is," Evan replied, "and it's worth protecting." For a while they spoke freely, trading stories like precious gifts. Evan asked about the glowing vines that lined the towers. Leora asked about human music, and he hummed a quiet melody his friend Marcus used to play on the harmonica. The sound trembled in the vast courtyard. To Evan's surprise, Leora hummed back, her low tone blending with his in a strange and beautiful harmony. The water glowed brighter, but not everyone was moved. From the edge of the courtyard, a stern elder stepped forward. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "The bond is not a song," he warned. "It is a promise. Do not mistake softness for strength." Leora bowed her head slightly, but her eyes stayed on Evan. "I know," she said. When the elders left, the courtyard fell silent except for the soft ripple of the pool. Evan let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Do they all doubt this?" he asked. "Some fear the bond," Leora admitted. "They say our kind will weaken if we tie hearts to yours. They remember war. They see danger." Evan looked at the glowing water. "My people are afraid too. Some think I'm a fool for coming here." She tilted her head, her massive braids sliding across her shoulders. "And you?" "I think—" He hesitated, feeling the strange warmth in his chest. "I think we can be better than fear." A faint smile curved her lips. "You are brave, Evan of Earth." He felt a sudden flush, not from pride but from the way her voice wrapped around his name. The rest of the day passed in quiet wonder. Leora showed him the crystal gardens where flowers chimed when touched by wind. She taught him a greeting gesture, palms open to the sky, symbolizing trust. Evan shared simple human jokes that made her laugh, a sound like distant bells rolling through the air. They sat side by side as the two moons rose, their reflections weaving together on the pool's surface. As night deepened, Evan realized he no longer felt the sharp edge of fear. The giant girl beside him was no monster, no enemy. She was a person, curious, strong, and quietly kind. He sensed the bond forming, not through magic or ceremony, but through every shared story and silent glance. When he finally returned to his quarters, the city glowed with a gentle blue heartbeat. He lay awake, staring at the high ceiling, replaying her laughter and the soft gold of her eyes. Somewhere beyond the walls, Leora might be thinking of him too. For the first time in years, Evan felt something close to peace, and beneath that peace, a fragile, thrilling hope began to grow. The days that followed felt like a quiet dream. Each morning, Evan crossed the humming streets of the Crystal City to meet Leora by the memory pool. Together, they shared stories, laughter, and small wonders. He taught her a few human words, smiling when she tried to pronounce friend or music, with her deep melodic voice. She showed him the sky gardens, where silver leaves glowed like moonlight and sang when brushed by the wind. But a shadow soon crept into that fragile peace. It began with whispers. Evan noticed it first when he passed a group of Cora merchants. Their golden eyes slid toward him, and their low voices dropped to a hush. At the human base, soldiers stared longer than usual when he returned from the city. Conversations cut off when he entered the mess hall. The bond that had felt like a small miracle now drew suspicion like iron to a magnet. One evening, after a long walk through the glowing gardens, Evan arrived at the pool to find Leora standing alone, her head bowed. The usual shimmer in her golden eyes was dull like a stormed-over sky. "Leora?" he asked, his voice low. "What's wrong?" She looked up, and for the first time he saw something close to fear. "The council met today," she said slowly. "They speak of dishonor. They say my heart is turning from the Cora path. They want me to end the bond." Evan's chest tightened. "End it? Why?" "They fear weakness," she replied, her voice trembling like distant thunder. "They believe joining minds with a human will bend me, make me forget who I am." Evan clenched his fists. "And what do you believe?" Leora stepped closer, each movement heavy with sorrow. "I believe the bond is more than a treaty. I believe it is hope, but the council says hope is a soft thing. They remember war. They remember loss. They do not trust your kind." Evan looked at her giant form silhouetted against the glowing towers. He thought of all the small moments they had shared, the harmony of their voices, the soft chime of garden leaves, the way her laughter filled the quiet spaces inside him. He couldn't let it break apart because of old fears. "Do you want to end it?" he asked. Her golden eyes met his. "I want to stay." The simple words hit him harder than any weapon. "Then we stay," he said, his voice steady. For a moment her lips curved in a faint, grateful smile. But the weight in her gaze remained. The next day suspicion sharpened into accusation. Evan was summoned to the human command post, a temporary structure of metal and glass near the desert edge. The air inside smelled of heated circuits and stale coffee. Captain Morales waited for him, her arms crossed, her face carved from stone. "Sit," she said. Evan obeyed, feeling the tension thick in the room. "We've received reports," Morales began. You've been spending long hours with the Cora girl, alone. She's not, Evan started, but the captain raised a hand. You think you're helping, Sergeant? Maybe you are. But some of the brass believe you're being manipulated. The Cora might be using you to gather intel or weaken our stance. This bond of yours, it's dangerous, Evan stared at the table. She's not using me. Morales leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp. You can't be sure. You're too close, he met her gaze, jaw tight. I am sure. The captain studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Look, I don't doubt your heart, but if this escalates, we'll have no choice but to pull you out. Think carefully, Sergeant. Your duty is to Earth. Evan left the post with a storm in his chest. He walked across the dark plain toward the glowing city, the twin moons casting long shadows behind him. His boots struck the ground with restless force. Was he a fool? Was he risking everything for a bond that might break anyway? Yet every memory of Leora rose to meet his doubt. Her quiet laughter, the calm strength in her voice, the way she listened as if every word mattered. That night, he met Leora beneath a sky alive with stars. They chose a quiet spot near the edge of the gardens where silver leaves whispered in the wind. They spoke to me today, Evan said, voice low. They think you're using me. Leora's brows furrowed. Using you? For what? To weaken us, to... I don't even know. To make us trust you too easily. He let out a sharp breath. They want me to walk away. Leora lowered her gaze, her braids sliding like dark rivers across her shoulders. Perhaps they are right to fear. Evan stepped closer until he could see the soft glow of her skin. Do you believe that? She was silent for a long time, the night air heavy between them. Then she looked at him with a quiet sadness. No, but sometimes fear is louder than truth. The wind carried a faint chime from the crystal flowers. Evan reached out and laid his hand against the warm curve of her finger, the same way he had during their first meeting. Her hand trembled slightly beneath his touch. Maybe they're right about one thing, he said softly. Maybe we are foolish. Leora tilted her head, golden eyes searching his. Foolish to hope? He nodded once, a slow, small smile touched her lips. Then let us be foolish together. Something in his chest eased like a knot untangling. In that moment, with the stars above and her vast presence beside him, Evan felt the bond strengthen. Not as a grand ceremony, but as a quiet defiance against fear itself. They sat there until the moons climbed high, saying little, simply sharing the stillness. Around them, the city pulsed with a gentle blue light, alive and watchful, for a brief precious span of time. The world beyond their bond, the councils, the soldiers. The endless distrust faded into silence, yet deep down, Evan knew the storm had only begun. The days after the council's warning felt heavy, as if the sky itself pressed down on the city of crystal. Evan could sense it in the air whenever he walked through the wide, glowing streets. Cora citizens glanced at him with wary eyes, their golden irises flickering like distant suns. Whispers followed him like shadows. Even the children who once giggled at his small size now peeked from behind doorways and quickly vanished. At the human base, things were no better. Soldiers who had once slapped his shoulder in friendly greeting now gave curt nods or avoided his gaze altogether. The mess hall fell silent when he entered, spoons pausing mid-air. Rumors spread like dry grass catching flame. Watch yourself. Sergeant, one soldier muttered as Evan passed. He's more Cora than human now, another said under his breath. Evan pretended not to hear, but the words cut deep. Each night he lay awake in his small quarters, staring at the ceiling as the hum of the alien city drifted through the window. He thought about the simple stories he and Leora had shared, the laughter that had felt so easy, and wondered if it was all beginning to crumble. Leora felt the tension too. When they met by the memory pool, her usually bright eyes seemed dimmer like a candle fighting the wind. She listened when he spoke, but sometimes glanced toward the distant towers, as if expecting someone to call her away. One evening, after a long silence between them, she finally said, "The council grows restless. They speak of ending the bond by force." Evan's heart clenched. Force? What does that mean? They could forbid me to meet you. They could send me away to another world. Her voice was quiet but firm. They might even threaten your people to break our link. Evan looked at her, his chest tightening. Would you obey? Leora's massive shoulders lifted slightly, a slow, painful movement. I am Cora, I respect our elders. But my heart, She touched the center of her chest with one great hand. My heart does not wish to leave. The honesty in her words filled Evan with both warmth and fear. Then we hold on, he said, trying to sound brave. We keep meeting. We show them we are stronger together. Her golden eyes searched his face. You risk much. So do you, he replied. I'd rather risk everything than give up on what we've built. For a moment her lips curved in a faint smile, and the faint shimmer of their bond pulsed between them. Yet the weight of their worlds lingered like a storm on the horizon. The storm came sooner than either expected. 2 nights later, alarms blared through the human base. Evan woke to flashing red lights and the harsh crackle of radios. Supply route under threat, a voice shouted. Unidentified Korra warriors on the ridge? Evan grabbed his uniform and ran outside. The desert wind whipped sand across his face as he joined the rushing soldiers. In the distance, along a jagged ridge, tall silhouettes loomed beneath the twin moons. Korra warriors, their spears catching the moonlight like shards of fire. Captain Morales barked orders. Hold the line. Don't fire unless fired upon. Evan's stomach twisted. The Korra warriors weren't attacking, not yet. But their presence was a message, a warning. He slipped away from the squad and moved toward the city, his heart pounding. If the warriors were here, it meant the council was pushing back hard. Leora would know. When he reached the crystal courtyard, she was already there, her face lit by the cold glow of the moons. Her enormous frame trembled as she spoke. My council sent them, she said. They mean to show strength. They're scaring people, Evan said, his voice sharp. One wrong move and there'll be blood. I told them this path leads only to pain, Leora whispered, her golden eyes bright with worry. They would not listen. Evan took a step closer, feeling the faint hum of the memory pool under his boots. Then we have to be louder than their fear. How? Her question was almost a plea. Evan looked up at her, small and breakable beside her towering form. We stay together. We show them we won't let fear win. Leora lowered her giant hand until it rested on the ground, the fingers trembling. Evan reached out and placed his hand on the warm curve of her finger, just as he had on the first night they met. The moment their skin touched, the shimmering bond flared to life, a gentle light, soft but defiant. Maybe they'll never understand, he said quietly. Maybe we can't change their hearts. But we can't hide either. Leora's voice dropped to a whisper as deep as the ocean. Evan of Earth you are. Foolish, he smiled faintly. I've been told that before. She tilted her head and a soft laugh rumbled from her chest, a sound that seemed to warm the cold night air. Then let us be foolish together, she said, repeating the words that had once bound their resolve. As the twin moons climbed higher, the tension outside the city sharpened. Human patrols took up positions, rifles trained on the ridge. Korra warriors stood like statues, their spears catching moonlight. One spark could ignite the dry tinder of mistrust. Evan and Leora sat in the courtyard, the hum of the city surrounding them. They spoke little, letting the bond's quiet glow speak for them. Evan felt her presence in his mind, steady and vast, like a mountain beneath the stars. The night grew colder, the wind sharper, but in that circle of shimmering light he felt a strange calm. He knew the storm was not over. Bigger battles might wait beyond the horizon. Battles of words, of will, perhaps even of weapons. Yet here, beneath the violet sky, he also knew this. Fear could not erase what they had found. Their bond, though fragile, was real. It lived in shared silence and in the quiet courage of two hearts that refused to be enemies. And as the first pale hint of dawn touched the crystal towers, Evan made a silent promise to himself and to the giant girl beside him. Whatever came next, threats, anger, even war, he would not walk away. The next sunrise bled red across the desert, as if the sky itself carried a warning. Evan barely slept. The uneasy stillness that hung between the human base and the Korra city felt heavier than armor. Each hour stretched like a drawn bowstring ready to snap. Reports came in of tense standoffs along the supply road. Human patrols watched the Korra warriors on the ridge, weapons locked and ready. The Korra refused to step back, their golden eyes fixed on the human lines. It was as if both sides waited for one reckless spark to ignite the dry grass of fear. Evan stood outside the command tent, the wind tugging at his uniform. Captain Morales strode past, barking orders into her radio. Double the perimeter guard. No one fires unless I say so. But be ready, he knew what that meant. One nervous finger could end the fragile truce. His thoughts kept turning to Leora. Was she safe? Did she know how close the two sides hovered to violence? He couldn't stay idle while suspicion smothered everything they had built. Ignoring the curious stares of his fellow soldiers, Evan slipped through the outer gate and began the long walk toward the Crystal City. The desert wind carried the faint hum of tension. Machines, distant voices, the low throb of kora drums echoing off the hills. His boots sank slightly in the cold sand, each step a silent prayer. As he neared the city, the sound of shouting reached him, human voices and the sharper rumble of kora speech. Smoke curled upward beyond the first row of crystal towers. His stomach tightened. Something was happening. Evan ran. He emerged into a wide plaza near the edge of the kora settlement and froze. A human supply truck burned near a toppled gate, flames licking the air. Soldiers stood in a rough line, rifles raised. Across from them, a group of kora warriors blocked the street, their spears gleaming like shards of moonlight. Between the two groups stood Leora. The giant girl knelt in the center of the chaos, her broad shoulders curved around a cluster of kora children. Her golden eyes glowed with both fear and fierce resolve. Shards of broken crystal glittered at her feet. Above the roar of fire, Evan heard her voice calling in her own language, steady but urgent. A soldier at the front of the human line shouted, "Move aside." His rifle was already aimed. "No." Evan's voice cracked as he sprinted forward. "Hold your fire." Several soldiers turned, startled. Captain Morales arrived from the rear, her face a storm. "Sergeant, get back now." But Evan didn't stop. He pushed through the line, ignoring the hands that tried to pull him back. Heat from the burning truck bit at his skin. Smoke stung his eyes. He raised his arms high so everyone could see he carried no weapon. "Stop," he shouted again, his voice breaking the tense air. "She's not the enemy." "No one fires!" The kora warriors tightened their grip on their spears. The human soldiers adjusted their aim. The whole world seemed to balance on a knife's edge. Evan stepped closer to Leora until he stood barely a few feet from her towering form. The children beneath her arm whimpered softly. He looked up and met her golden eyes. "It's okay," he said, though his own heart pounded like a war drum. A single gunshot cracked the air, then silence. Evan felt the bullet hiss past his shoulder and strike the crystal wall behind him. Gasps erupted from both sides. "Hold your fire!" Captain Morales bellowed, her voice sharp enough to slice stone. "Cease fire, damn it!" The echoes of her command rolled away into the tense night. Slowly, rifles lowered. The kora warriors shifted but did not strike. Evan turned back to Leora. A thin streak of blood ran down her arm where a piece of shrapnel had cut her. The sight twisted his chest. "You're hurt," he said. She shook her massive head. "A small wound," she rumbled. Her gaze swept over the human soldiers, then softened as it found Evan again. "You stand between us." "Yes," he answered, his voice rough but steady. "For you, for them, for peace." Her eyes shone brighter, as if some quiet fire burned there. "You would stand before your own kind." "For me?" "For all of us," he said. "This has to stop. No more fear. No more blood." For a long heartbeat, no one moved. The crackling of the burning truck was the only sound. Then slowly, Captain Morales lowered her own weapon and stepped forward. Her voice carried across the plaza. "Stand down," she commanded again. "Everyone, stand down." The soldiers obeyed. The kora warriors lowered their spears, their movements deliberate and careful. The thick knot of violence began to loosen. Leora let out a deep, trembling breath. She shifted to kneel fully, her massive hands still shielding the children, but her posture less rigid. "The bond holds," she said softly, almost to herself. Evan turned to face both sides, his arms still raised. "This doesn't have to end in war," he said, his voice loud enough to carry. "We can choose something better. Right now." Silence stretched like a fragile bridge. Then one of the kora elders stepped from the crowd. His golden eyes, once hard as stone, studied Evan with quiet gravity. Slowly, he lowered his spear completely and tapped its end against the ground. A gesture of respect. A murmur rippled through the kora ranks. On the human side, Captain Morales gave a single curt nod. "Secure the area," she ordered her troops. "No more shots." Relief flooded Evan so suddenly his knees nearly buckled. He looked back at Leora. Her wound still bled lightly, the red bright against her bronze skin. Without thinking, he reached up and placed his small hand against her warm finger. She bent closer, letting their touch linger in the thick smoke-filled air. Around them, the fire hissed as soldiers worked to douse the flames. The night was still tense, but the moment of deadly frenzy had passed. The fragile bond had held. Evan exhaled, heart still pounding. He realized he had stepped into the line of fire not because he wanted to be brave, but because something deeper had guided him, something that refused to let fear destroy the fragile hope he and Leora had begun. The sky above the crystal towers shimmered with the fading light of 2 moons. And for the first time since war had scarred their worlds, a breath of true peace touched the desert air. The night after the clash smelled of wet ash and cooling sand. Fires had been put out, but the memory of gunfire still trembled in the air. Evan sat near the edge of the crystal plaza, his arms resting on his knees, watching faint blue light flow along the Cora towers like rivers of quiet thought. He felt every beat of his heart, each one a reminder that he was alive and that he had nearly lost everything. Across the plaza, Leora moved carefully among her people. Her bronze skin caught the twin moon's glow, but Evan noticed the crimson streak on her shoulder where shrapnel had cut deep. Even from a distance he could see the heavy weight of the day in the slope of her massive shoulders. She gave soft words of comfort to the frightened children and firm instructions to the Cora warriors, who now kept their weapons lowered. When at last she approached him, the sound of her steps was soft, almost hesitant. Evan stood. The giant girl knelt so her golden eyes met his. The gentle light from the memory pool shimmered between them. "You are safe," she said, her voice low but steady. "I am," Evan answered, though his chest still ached with leftover fear. He looked at her shoulder and winced. "But you're hurt." Leora glanced at the wound. "A small thing," she replied. "It will heal." "That doesn't mean it should be ignored," he said, taking a step closer. The faint metallic scent of her blood mixed with the cool desert wind. "You stood there protecting the children while everyone aimed their weapons at you. That wasn't small." Her golden eyes softened. "And you stood between them and me. You faced your own soldiers. Why?" Evan searched for words. The answer was so simple it almost frightened him. "Because you're not the enemy," he said quietly. Because I couldn't let them hurt you." For a moment they both stayed silent, the night humming around them. Then Leora tilted her head, a strange light flickering in her gaze. "You would stand before your own kind." "For me?" "Yes," Evan said. He felt no need to hide the truth. "For you. For peace. For the bond we share." The air around them seemed to shift, as if the entire city exhaled. The surface of the memory pool began to glow more brightly, a silver-blue light that pulsed in time with their words. "The bond," Leora repeated, almost a whisper. "It is more than a treaty now." Evan nodded. "It's real. I feel it every time we talk, every time we stand together. It's bigger than us, but it's also us." Leora reached out, her massive hand lowering until her palm hovered near him like a warm, living platform. Evan stepped forward and placed his small hand against her skin. At once a gentle shimmer surged through him. No shock, no pain, only a deep, quiet warmth that filled the hollow places inside his heart. Images flickered at the edge of his mind. A mountain of silver under twin suns, a crystal forest humming in the wind, the scent of Earth's autumn leaves after rain. He realized some of those images were hers and some were his, weaving together like strands of light. "I can feel you," he whispered, awed. "And I you," Leora said softly. "Your memories." "Your hopes. They touch me." The glow between their hands brightened, rising in a soft arc that wrapped them both in gentle light. Around them, Cora elders and human soldiers began to gather, drawn by the sudden brilliance. No one spoke. Captain Morales approached slowly, her face unreadable. Beside her, a tall Cora elder watched with eyes that reflected both caution and wonder. The 2 leaders stopped at the edge of the pool, their gazes fixed on the human and the giant girl standing in a circle of living light. Evan could feel their attention, but kept his eyes on Leora. "This is what I meant," he said quietly. "This is what we can be." Leora's voice deepened, carrying across the plaza like a low hymn. "This is the bond of trust, not of blood or command, but of choice." The silver light swelled higher, casting soft shadows across the towers. Evan felt as if the entire galaxy had gone still to listen. For a heartbeat, the fear and anger of 2 worlds faded, replaced by something purer, understanding. Captain Morales finally stepped forward. "Sergeant," she said, her voice softer than Evan had ever heard. "Are you certain of this?" "There's no turning back." "I'm certain," Evan replied. He turned slightly so his voice carried to everyone present. "This bond isn't just between me and Leora. It's a promise that we don't have to live in fear. We can trust. We can choose peace." The Korra elder inclined his great head, golden eyes reflecting the glowing pool. After a long silence, he spoke in his deep rumble. "Perhaps this is the path we sought but could not name." Murmurs of agreement rose among the Korra. Human soldiers lowered their weapons completely. The tense energy that had hovered for days began to unravel like smoke in the wind. Leora lowered her other hand until it rested gently beside Evan. "Evan of Earth," she said, her voice a warm echo. "Our bond is seen. It lives." The glow of the pool flared once more, then slowly faded to a steady, gentle shine. Evan felt a quiet strength settle in his chest. Not the rush of battle, but the calm certainty of something enduring. When the light dimmed enough for stars to reclaim the sky, Evan finally let his hand fall. He looked up at Leora, whose golden eyes held a softness he would never forget. "We did it," he whispered. "We began it," she corrected, a faint smile touching her lips. The crowd around them slowly dispersed, some still whispering, some silent with awe. Captain Morales gave Evan a single nod, not of command but of respect. The Korra elder raised his great hand in what Evan now recognized as a gesture of blessing. As the plaza emptied, the night felt different, lighter, as if a door had opened. The two moons climbed higher, washing the world in pale light. Evan remained at Leora's side, his heart steady, his fear gone. The bond between them no longer felt fragile. It was alive, a quiet fire that would not fade with the dawn. For the first time since the war began, both worlds stood on the same ground, held together not by treaties or weapons, but by the simple, unstoppable courage of trust. Morning crept across the desert like a slow tide of gold. The night's cold faded as the first rays of sunlight touched the crystal towers of the Korra city. The air smelled fresh after the long tension, carrying only the faint scent of wet stone and distant fire. For the first time in months, the world felt still and kind. Evan stood on a high ridge with Leora beside him. From here he could see the human base and the shining Korra streets, two worlds separated by only a strip of sand. Soldiers on both sides moved carefully but without the heavy clatter of weapons. They walked in small groups, talking in low voices, helping one another clear debris from the plaza below. He let out a slow breath, amazed at the quiet. "It feels different," he said. "It is different," Leora replied. Her deep voice vibrated softly in the morning air. "The bond we made is seen. Both sides feel it, even if they do not have words." Evan looked up at her face, the golden eyes catching sunlight like twin fires. Her wound from the night before had been cleaned and wrapped by her own healers, but he still worried. "How's your shoulder?" "A small ache," she said, almost smiling. "It will remind me of what was risked and what was gained." Below them, Captain Morales arrived with a small group of soldiers. She waved when she spotted Evan and began climbing the ridge. Evan turned to Leora. "She probably wants to talk about what happens next." Leora tilted her head. "The next step belongs to both of our people, not just to leaders, but yes, we must speak." When the captain reached the top, her boots crunching on the stone, she gave a short nod. "Sergeant," she said, then looked up at Leora. "And to you, Leora of the Korra. Last night could have ended in disaster. Instead, we're standing here." Evan could hear a rare softness in her voice. "We stand," Leora answered calmly, "because we chose trust." Morales folded her arms. "Our council wants to begin talks. Real talks, not just trade deals. They want you, both of you, to help guide them." Evan blinked. "Us? You two did what our entire fleets couldn't," Morales said. "People saw the light in that plaza. They saw you both risk everything. That matters." She glanced at the horizon where the sun broke free of the hills. "If you're willing, we'll hold the first meeting here tonight." Leora inclined her great head in agreement. "I will stand with Evan." Evan felt a quiet warmth spread through his chest. "Then we'll do it," he said. By evening, the plaza looked transformed. Where flames had burned only a night ago, people from both species gathered. Lanterns glowed along the crystal arches. Human engineers worked beside Korra artisans to repair a shattered fountain, their laughter ringing across the square. Children, Small human ones and towering Korra youths played near the memory pool, splashing and chasing the soft light. Evan and Leora stood together at the center, waiting as representatives approached. He saw familiar faces from his unit, diplomats from the council and Korra elders draped in silver cloth. The memory pool shimmered a gentle blue as if listening. The meeting began without speeches or ceremony. Instead, people simply spoke. A human farmer stepped forward. "We came here because we were afraid," he admitted, voice rough. "But last night we saw something. We want peace." A Korra warrior followed, laying his spear gently on the ground. "We feared you would destroy our home." But the bond between Evan and Leora showed another way. "We too choose peace." Others added their voices. Traders, soldiers, elders. The words flowed like water, slow and sincere. Evan listened, heart full, while Leora's golden eyes shone with quiet pride. When it was finally their turn, Evan looked around the plaza. "We were strangers," he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "We were told to fear each other. But fear isn't stronger than trust. Leora and I believed in something better, and now we can all choose that same path." Leora lowered her massive hand until it rested near him, palm up. "Trust is not only a word," she said. "It is action. Last night we acted. Tonight we continue." A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The elders nodded. The soldiers stood easy, and the memory pool brightened as if the city itself approved. Hours later, after the meeting ended and the plaza grew quiet, Evan and Leora remained by the pool. The two moons rose, their silver light dancing on the crystal surface. Evan watched the stars flicker above. "I never thought I'd see this day," he said. "When I first landed here, I thought every Korra was my enemy. And I believed every human was a destroyer," Leora admitted. Her deep voice held both sadness and wonder. "But you reached for my hand when others raised weapons. That changed everything." Evan smiled faintly. "I just couldn't let fear win." "You did more than that," she said, leaning closer until her warm breath touched him like a gentle breeze. "You showed me the strength of a small heart that refuses to break." He looked up at her, the giant girl who had once been a stranger and was now something far more. "We did this together." "Yes," she said, her golden eyes glowing softly. "Together." For a long time they sat in peaceful silence. The memory pool shimmered with the reflections of both their faces, one human, one Korra, side by side. Evan thought of the future, rebuilding trust, learning each other's languages, sharing food and stories. There would be struggles, of course, but tonight proved that a new path was possible. Finally, he spoke. "Do you think our bond will last?" Leora turned her gaze to the sky where the two moons floated like eternal sentinels. "It will last," she said, "because it is more than friendship or treaty. It is the courage to stand when the world trembles. That courage lives in both of us and in all who choose peace." Her words settled deep in Evan's heart, warm and sure. He reached out, resting his small hand on her vast, gentle finger. The light of the pool rose again, wrapping them in a soft halo that glowed against the night. No one else was there to witness it. Yet Evan felt the entire world watching, their two worlds, bound not by chains or conquest, but by the quiet power of understanding. Above them, the stars burned bright and endless, and in that boundless sky a new story had begun. A story of two species, two hearts, and one unshakable bond that would carry them toward a shared dawn.